G'day fans and welcome back to another exciting episode of DNA reviewing the Book of Boba Fett. And I tell you what, who knew that they were going to make this show in 4D? Now the idea of 4D, of course, is that you actually feel the environment that you're actually in. And because we see so much of Tatooine and because Melbourne is so freaking hot at the moment, it's almost like you watch the show now thinking, oh my God, I'm actually feeling the twin suns. They're cooking me alive. What's the deal? What do you reckon, Mr. Aaron?
When I watch it, you can actually smell Tatooine.
So I'm not going to say you're not smelling Tatooine, dude. You're smelling something completely different. But anyway, not to worry. Good old Chrissy's joined us. Oh, look, Chrissy's got a special hi, Aaron. There we go. Look at that. Cop a whiff of that, old son. Good old Greg's got us and has Colin as well. So here we are talking about The Gathering Storm. Very exciting. Episode 4 in 3 words or less, Mr. Aaron. What did you think of The Gathering Storm?
It gathered momentum.
I love it. So each week I'm going to ask you for the 3-word review and you're going to give it to me, which is absolutely fantastic. Yes, 4D is time. No, 4D is temperature. I don't know about you, but I'm so hot at the moment. And of course, it's hot outside. And of course, the episode is hot as well. Now, naturally, as always, there will be spoilers in this particular episode, as you should know by now. So if you haven't seen the episode, now's the time to run off and watch it and then come back to us because we'll probably talk longer than the episode will be on, which is particularly groovy. Any thoughts before we move on to the episode itself, Mr. Aaron?
Do we send police out to Angelo's place? This is the very first episode he hasn't said hi first.
Yeah, exactly right. Maybe his computer room doesn't have the air conditioner. What can I say? Now, because of the episode is broken up to 2 time zones again, we're going to do the flashback stuff first and then get into the present material. And as we've discussed previously, the flashback material is actually more interesting than the present stuff. And I think you had some theories regarding that or some views. Is that right, Mr. Aaron?
Yeah, I was saying to Dags, I do wonder, and it might happen afterwards where a fan cuts it together. I do wonder if the series would have been better if they had done it chronologically. So all the background with him getting out of the Sarlacc pit, the Tusken tribe with the first half of the series to see him become the man he is. So we understand a bit better why he's behaving not so much like Boba Fett from the movies in the current day scenes, but Dags pointed out, yeah, we wouldn't have seen him in Boba Fett armor till halfway through the series, and people might have been a bit like upset by that.
Yeah, generation now just wouldn't be able to handle it. It's like, come on, man, I don't want to see this fat bull dude running around flicking Tusken Raiders. Give me some bubble fat, mate. That's what I want to see. So there you go. Oh my goodness, look, what's this crap that adds is going on? Temperature's not a dimension as high. Whatever, dude. Yeah, okay. Just where's he smoking the wacky tobacco on this really hot night? All right, let's get into the episode, shall we? So we're talking with the past stuff first, as always. The like Tatooine looks spectacular. And as I said, I'm just looking at that. I'm just feeling the temperature now for outside. And Ange has actually joined us, which is particularly groovy. So I've got to say, once again, the visuals are spectacular. I still can't work out how they're doing the banthas. But I've got to say, just looking at this, it does remind you of Dune. But it looked particularly groovy, I've got to say, which is kind of cool. And, of course, it even shows that even banthas can have a hard time of it because it's actually a bantha horn just there. What do you reckon, old son?
Yeah, I kind of thought that was a callback to the crate dragon bones that 3PO went by. It's a very Star Wars shot, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. But it just goes to show, and we will be discussing at the very end of the episode. We've got a bit of a timeline that we've put together as how the whole past and the present works, because there've been a lot of questions as to how long has time passed between the two, and some of it's speculative, but it might help some people understand where everything fits in the scheme of things. But that's right at the end of the episode, so you're just going to have to sit and wait it out. So the key thing is we find that the palace, now we've got to get used to not calling it Jabba's palace because Jabba's been dead for a few years at this point. He's just the palace car park. And I thought this was kind of interesting. So good old Fett turns up, has a bit of a look and says, nah, there's too many guards. I mean, why would the guards change? I mean, it'd be the same amount of dudes there all the time. What did you think?
It reminded me, there's a few things that remind me of different movies, almost a comedy from The Princess Bride, where they go to raid the castle and he goes, it can't be done with just 3 of us. Boba Fett looks and goes, it can't be done with just 1 person. We need 2 people. I didn't think it actually made that much of a difference. Kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? It's like, can you imagine he turns up and goes, "Oh, all the guards are like having a celebration at the moment, big birthday party gig, and they've all nicked off. Oh, now's the time to go and get the ship." Anyway, we'll discuss a bit more about the ship a bit later on. Love that, as we've said earlier, the visuals and the imagery is absolutely spectacular. This one I thought really caught me off guard. Tatooine has 3 moons.
Three moons. I was actually going to bring that with you. I was like, I never realized that. 2 suns, but I didn't know it had 3 moons. And they're all in a lined up orbit. So it's obviously either a conjunction or they orbit together.
Yeah, how bizarre is that? So I think, to the best of my knowledge, it's the first time we've seen moons on Tatooine. But I thought that was kind of groovy, and of course that was a transition from a daylight shot prior to this. But so there you go. So I don't know if anybody's run out and decided to name the moons because the suns are Tattoo 1 and Tattoo 2. But yeah, I thought that was kind of groovy. So yeah, very groovy.
That means the moons must be Weenie 1,
What?
2, and 3. Weenie 1, Weenie 2, and Weenie 3.
There you go. Absolutely fantastic. All right, so we have a whole lot of Boba Fett sequences with his Bantha, right? His trusty Bantha, which he obviously didn't name. Could have called the Bantha slave too. I love the fact that it had the waggy tail. I had to lighten the shot because some of the shots are so dark. And the fact that Bantha had wagged his tail. And it eats meat. I thought Banthas would have been herbivores at the very least, but it's a bit of a meat eater. And he feeds it the smallest bone in the universe. It'd be the equivalent of like a twig for most other creatures, but what did you think of that?
I thought the same thing. I for some reason, just thought Banthas would be herbivores too, but it makes sense because there's not much vegetation on Tatooine at all, is there?
Yeah, exactly right. Russell's got it. Huey, Dewey, and Louie for the moons. Yes, that's straight out of Silent Running. Those who love their stuff. So there you go. I love it. Oh, those aren't moons; they're space stations. Oh, Rusky Babes is in the Star Wars zone at the moment, which is cool. Larry, Curly, and Mo. Jeez. Oh, we're gonna have some fun with that, can't we? So, which is particularly groovy. So Boba Fett's running around on his Bantha in the desert. It's all very, very exciting. And then suddenly, oh my goodness, we're seeing stuff that links directly back to The Mandalorian, which was a nice little bit of linkage between the two shows. And I thought that was actually particularly groovy. And of course, that leads us directly into the sequence from The Gunslinger, the episode of The Mandalorian, where Fett finds Fennec Shand all busted and wounded and all the rest of it. And of course, at the time when Mandalorian was on, nobody knew whose legs these were. And right, there's all this speculation. Is it Boba Fett? Is it somebody else? Now, of course, it is actually Boba Fett. So, but do you remember the discussion when that all took place?
Yeah, it is nice to know that there's the long game that Disney have been playing, because obviously they had this set up. They've set out like a couple of years of things. And it is nice that fans can speculate, and some people got it right. So, yeah, it is good that they have stuff in it that you can discuss, and some people will come up with the correct theory, because what I hate is where they put something in it and then no one comes up with the right idea, and what they do, they go, we put that in, but we didn't know it was going to go. I think this is really planned out.
Yeah, and it did work very, very well. And the fact that they could use footage from The Gunslinger, the episode of Mandalorian, mixed in with the Boba Fett footage, and it just was seamless. And that worked out really, really well. I like from Gavin, Boba Eastwood. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it's the whole Gunslinger thing. Now, I got to admit, I had a bit of a laugh when I saw this, right? So, as we saw in The Mandalorian, Fennec was wounded, and that was it. We never saw her again, right? We get to this episode, and then we see the continuation of that. So Boba Fett picks up Fennec, chucks on the back of the Bantha, and I thought, okay, is he off to the hospital to give her first aid? And it's like, nah, stuff that. Straight to the mod shop. That's it. We're going to rip out her internal organs and put droid shit inside her. What's the deal with that?
It is really interesting. Like, it was another one of those sequences where we're at the start of the episode, and obviously we're going to look at it a bit more. I'm like, oh no, I don't know if I'm liking this. This is more the droids, the Tatooine from the Droids cartoon rather than the Tatooine from the series we've been kind of watching. What did you think of the whole thing?
Yeah, I want to sort of elaborate on my thoughts and a few ticks. Very cyberpunk. Yeah, it is a bit like that. So the interesting thing is that we get to see, because we saw the mod, what I've called the Mod Squad, the Vesper group in episode 3. Now we've got the Mod Parlor, where they actually get a little bits sort of changed, if you will. And I thought this part at least worked okay. Sure, you had the techno music and whatever else. And the interesting thing that I picked up on, and now these guys look far more threatening and interesting than what we saw with the Vesper crowd.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I don't know about you, but I picked up, like when I watched this guy down here, I thought his glasses remind me of those from Maz Kanata from The Force Awakens. But one thing is that all the people in the Mod Parlor were all human, right? There was no aliens at all. And I did wonder afterwards, how far do people go regarding getting modifications with droid parts? Because it's very, if you will, kind of like Ghost in the Shell, right? If you ever saw that movie where people would, by choice, get modifications done to them. And you do wonder, okay, if you had the money, how much would you physically change? And it's certainly an interesting theory, but it's just humans only, no aliens for whatever reason.
What I find really interesting is the whole concept of modification, and it is like the older generation here and the younger generation here, where when Obi-Wan talked about Vader, he said he's more machine now than man, twisted and evil, and becoming more machine was definitely said in a derogatory way. But we've got now the younger generation on Tatooine, they want these mods to happen. So it kind of mirrors, the older generation, we're not going to go down to the tattoo parlor and get a tattoo. Then everyone from our generation is like, we're getting body art kind of thing. I think it's the same kind of thing they're showing on Tatooine, where the older generation might not have liked mods, but the new modern generation get the mods because it's the cool and hip and trendy thing to do.
That's a very good point. Grant has said going for the Sith red eyes look, and I thought, you know what, you could argue that maybe the lady up here, she's going for the El Cheapo Jawa cosplay thing, put a hood on her and get the eyes showing and all the rest of it. Have to wait and see. But yeah, very, very interesting. Now, I did find it interesting that the guy, the doctor, I thought he would have to be a droid, like an FX7 or a 2-1B. It's just a dude, right? And as I made a reference there to the Ghost in the Shell thing. And I thought, okay, it's just a random guy. And he does all the work himself. And as was mentioned here, where were we? Everything, you're right, Christy. Everything is so clean and new. And I guess that's an interesting sort of way of looking at it because, one, he's like Doctor of Borg, right? So it's the ultimate Star Trek reference. And considering that he does modifications just as like people want to upgrade an arm or a leg or the eyes or whatever, he seems pretty relaxed about the fact he's got to save a life. Fett's just brought in a half-dead woman. And he's just said, yep, no worries, I'll just put all these droid bits in it like it's nothing. And I thought, okay. I thought there would be a little bit more stress. Certainly wasn't like an ER or a Chicago Hope. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where the technology in Star Wars, the whole, hygienic stuff with open wounds and putting parts in, there must be something sterile that we don't have here that just works. It's the same when Luke did his arm and everything. It's sort of, they closed it up and it was ready to go. What I found really interesting, again, in the Star Wars movies, Luke looks at his arm and it's like he's sort of disappointed, and when he sees Vader's arm. In this, you've got the guy going, why would you cover it up and show all the and hide all this beautiful modification kind of thing? So it's more like a cult. We've seen in some sci-fi movies where there's cults that, the cult of technology in and different things like New Gods by Gaiman and things like that. It's almost like they've elevated the body modification to the point where, they're showing it off and they're proud of it, and it's part of society.
Yeah, it's a good point, isn't it? Because when Luke had his done, his hand looked like a normal hand. It was only when it got damaged later on we sort of saw the internal workings. And it was like, oh my God, that's freaky, dude. But yeah, now people want to show this stuff off, and it's like it's a real contrast. So maybe you're right. It is the new generation of youngies. They go, no, we want people to see what we've had done to us.
It is interesting. Yeah. In the original Star Wars, the breadth of Lucas's imagination was fantastic, but there weren't really many cyborgs apart from Vader. And again, the implication when Luke chopped his hand off and it was robot hand and he looked at his hand, it was like a loss of humanity, where these guys are going down the track. We want to do this.
There is another alternative theory, of course, is that Luke became such a big hero after Return of the Jedi that people said, and they find out he's got a mechanical hand. They go, I want to be like him. And they actually do it because to emulate what Luke did. And to say, well, hey, droid parts are really, really cool. And it's just the industry has just picked up over the past few years or the past couple of years after Jedi. So maybe in a roundabout way, Luke was kind of responsible. He's the poster boy and they see he's got a mechanical arm. I've got to have one of those. And before you know it, the industry starts up. So
talking of droid parts, the actual chop shop they were in was an Easter egg delight if you were looking for different droids and stuff from all of the movies in all different eras. I don't know how many you picked up, but there was a Super Battle Droid's arm in there that he picked our hand, and then there was probe droids hanging from the roof and all these other things from different eras of Star Wars all through that. I guess the technology is interesting in the Star Wars universe, where you see an Attack of the Clones where 3PO gets his head knocked off and they whack another head on and it just works. And I kind of think they've got to the point with the technology where maybe there's synapses that heal instantly or whatever, and it just is compatible with everything.
That's a good point. Adsy's referred to Lobot. Now, Lobot had the brain enhancer on the back of his head, which was interesting. So it's a question of whether they had it put in by choice or whether it was done to save their life. Like obviously in the Vader scenario, it was to save his life. Luke had his hand replaced because it was cut off. These people are getting it done by choice. So it's an interesting philosophical question. And of course, my original point was saying, how far do you go? Does someone walk in and suddenly, aside from a human head, their entire body is a droid, and all the others go, that is grouse. We want to be like that. And before you know it, there's almost like a pseudo race has been created. So anyway, not too sure. But it's a long discussion we could have, and we won't have it here. Otherwise, we'll never get to the end of the episode. So didn't Dengar go down this path according to the new trilogy? I don't know. I don't know much about Dengar's backstory. What do you reckon?
I think in the books, he was in a speeder bike accident in a race or something, and then he had bionic implants, and that's why when we see him and catch up with him, he's got the bandages because they're slowly healing. But who knows how much of that they sort of take into canon these days.
Love it. And Colin, who had a leg amputated last year, he's asking for their address so he can get a new leg. Well, there you go. So go the full Borg. What can I say? I found it interesting that for the most part, this massive operation occurs. There's no blood anywhere except for this one bit when you see it going through the tubes. And as I said, the guy was unbelievably casual about it. He's just shoving all this stuff in like it was nothing, right? It's like, no worry about it. Changing internal organs is no big deal whatsoever. And it could have been, if it had been Chicago, Hope we are, there would have been bloody the cloud popping out everywhere. But, you know, it's a pseudo kids show, so you can't have it too gory and gruesome. And, you know, imagine he's like pulling out the body parts and he's giving them to Fett, who's standing right next to him. Oh, she doesn't need this anymore. It's a spleen and a kidney. It doesn't need that. There's just blood pissing out everywhere.
I did think her reaction too wasn't as major as maybe my reaction would have been if I'd woken up and like half of me was gone and replaced by droid parts. So. Yeah,
exactly right. We'll get to that in a few ticks. So anyway, we got some good character moments with Fett and Fennec, and there's a fair bit of this that goes on throughout the episode about their motivations and where they're going and what they're doing and all the rest of it. And we'll probably discuss this a bit later on, but it sort of at least clears up why Fett is heading down the path of doing the whole crime boss thing, and we will cover it again. Okay, I just wanted to put that shot in there just because it looked really, really groovy. But as you said, from Fennec's point of view, she wakes up and she goes, I mean, it's major surgery, and she wakes up, it's like, I'm good to rock and roll, mate. There's like, don't worry about recovery time, or, you know, after you've had COVID, you've got to sit in like ICU for a couple of weeks. No, I'm ready to party. What do you reckon?
From her point of view, she got knocked out in the desert. She came round in the desert. The whole middle bit is missing, and she's got a gut full of robot parts. So she can't walk through any of the Imperial detection things anymore without setting all the beepers off, can she?
Yeah, and you are right. She kind of got over it pretty quickly. You're thinking, oh my goodness gracious me, what's the deal? I mean, we don't know what the deal is regarding weight and mass and all the rest of it. And of course, how much was changed? Does she still need to eat and drink and whatever? I mean, it worked for the story, but when you sit and analyze it, you go, yeah, it was a little bit too simple. Ads has said maybe for them it is nothing, and who knows, maybe it is. But we can only go based on what we've seen previously within the stories and the movies and the universe. And it is a pretty radical thing. But I did think I was ironic that she's wounded. Oh, as in like this, Fett says, oh, she's wounded. Oh, don't worry about taking her off to the hospital. We'll just take her to the mod shop and just cut her up, dude. Shove in some droid bits, and she's good to go. The next bit that occurred, and I thought this was quite interesting. This is an example where you're crossing franchises. So he makes a mention about the melon, the watermelon thing, right?
Yep.
As he said there, it takes some getting used to, but with time you start to crave it. And then I started to think, hang on, is there spice in the melon? And of course, that harks directly back to Dune, because in Dune, the spice is addictive, and then you do start to crave it. And I was just a curious sort of throwaway line, but I thought it was interesting that after a while you start to crave whatever's in the melon. I thought, did you pick up on that at all?
I did, and also it hasn't really been maybe as shown in the Book of Boba Fett, but when it was in the Mandalorian, when they did break them open, there was a puff of like black powder kind of. So maybe it's something to do with that.
Yeah, love it. I like this one from Grant. Yeah, Tuscan coffee. Yeah, exactly right. Very, very groovy. Now, this, like a lot of things, when you see a lot of these shows, you see the imagery and you hear the dialogue, and sometimes the dialogue gives things away and you go, oh, I didn't pick up on that before. So in this instance, Fennec says about how the Nikto gang, the Kingston Striders, wasn't able to destroy the Tuscan tribe, right? So either did the Striders have help, or did they not do it at all and they were set up? Because we saw in the on the tent after Fett gets back, you got their logo on the tent. But wouldn't it be funny if the Pikes themselves went along killed the Tusken tribe because apparently they would have had the means to do it, and then blamed the Kingston Striders because later on we see what happens to those. So wouldn't it have been interesting is if in further down the story, once Fett starts talking to some Nikto dudes, right, and they go, no, it wasn't us who did that. Wouldn't that be an interesting? I mean, they won't do it because it's too complicated, but that would make an interesting twist to the story. Go, hang on, I've just blown these guys to the shit house, and they were actually innocent. It was someone else who knocked off the Tusken tribe. What do you reckon?
In my head, I kind of think they went moaning to the Pikes after they got beaten up at Toshi Station, and the Pikes are like, hey, we can get rid of 2 birds with 1 stone if we arm the gang to the hilt, and then they can go up, destroy Boba Fett and the Tuskens, kind of thing. That's what I kind of think must have happened.
Good point. I like this one from Adzi, right? She'd get over it in a few minutes, but Fett's history, you're right. Why didn't he obviously didn't have a Bacta tank handy at the time, but Bacta is the go-to place when someone's got a few body parts missing. You would have thought that's where they would have tried to. Has anybody got a Bacta tank floating around? Oh, no. Nah, all right, we're off to the mod shop to get some droid bits chucked in. So, yeah, it's good for him. It's good for Fett to get the Bacta treatment. He's not the one getting droid bits put in, but yeah, what do you reckon?
This is the difference on Tatooine between whether you have private health insurance or you have to go public. If you go public, you wind up halfway to being a Borg or a Cyberman. But if you've got private, you get in a Bacta tank and they get you back to 100%.
Absolutely love it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you hear some great dialogue in the shows and some dialoguing going, oh, yeah, right. This one caused a massive furor with the fan base, and I can kind of get it, right? There's been a whole lot of arguments regarding the name of the ship, Slave One, right? So awkward lines are us, where Fett says, help me recover my fire spray gunship. Why did you just say, help me recover my ship? What was the deal with that?
I kind of think if they're really doing the name change, make it part of the story. So maybe have Fennec Shan go, so we're going to get Slave One, and Boba Fett says, no, we don't. I'm not a slaver anymore. I'm not. So we're changing it to fire spray or whatever they want to. So there's actually a plot point on it or something. It was just awkward. I agree with you.
It doesn't add up. Help me get my fire spray gunship back. And it's like, really? You just say, help me get my ship back. And it's caused a bit of angst amongst the fan base.
I might be wrong, but I was pretty sure from the old technical manuals and stuff, it was a Slave One because it was a slave drive to his mind, so it reacted faster. I didn't think the name of the ship was Slave One because of he got slaves or anything like that. That said, it is, I guess, a sensitive topic to some people, and I guess if some people are really going to find it offensive, Disney are going to change it, aren't they? Because
true.
I don't know if you remember one of the Marvel movies. It must have been Thor Ragnarok, where she goes, the slaves, and Jeff Goldblum goes, oh, no, we can't use the S word. And she's like, okay, the prisoners with jobs.
Yeah. Either way, to say my fire spray guns ship rather than just saying my ship, it was very awkward. And I actually have heard an interview with Tamara Morrison, and he said he's been given that much dialogue in the show. Actually, he doesn't want it. He wanted to remain relatively mysterious, but he keeps getting all these words he's got to say, and there are obviously instances where he goes, that just sounds crap. But anyway, so we wait and see how it all transpires. I
like Grant's comment, fire spray layer.
Fire spray layer, yeah, exactly right. So, but anyway, they haven't mentioned Slave One, but Slave One does get mentioned in the Clone Wars animated series, I understand. So there you go. And you are right. Yeah, they're avoiding the word slave for whatever reason. Yeah, anyway, we move on. So it was just a really stupid line. It didn't gel, and it certainly didn't roll off the tongue very nicely. I thought this was kind of funny, right? So earlier on, we saw that Fett goes up to the palace, looks through the side of his gun, right? And then later on, we go back to the palace once he's picked up Fennec Shan, and she looks at the side of her gun. Now, you tell me the differences between these two sites, right? So clearly someone forgot to fit Fett's Tusken rifle with galaxy far, far away technology, because that looks like a standard, everyday, run-of-the-mill, modern-day gun sight on the right-hand side. What do you reckon?
I guess it is one of those things where different characters have different levels of technology, because, I guess they get it where they can and they take what they can get at the time. So I guess it is one of those world building things. One of the things I hate with TV shows, they might get a new special effect for one episode. So everybody's gun in that episode uses the same special effect. And then they go on to another episode and it's a different special effect, but everybody's gun uses the same effect again. It's one of those tropes,
You're right. And because you remember from A New Hope when Luke picked up the electro binoculars, right? And it was like, oh, that is cool. You got this really digital sort of funky looking image, even if it was complete shit. But it looked groovy. It looked futuristic. It was galaxy far, far away stuff. But when you see a gun sight that looks exactly like they just picked it up from the army disposals down the road, I had a bit of a laugh at that. I think you see something similar to that in Mandalorian. But still, when you compare that to Fennec Shan's gun, and you go, yeah, it kind of like, the idea is you're supposed to have all this really techno shit so you can zoom in and zoom out and all this other stuff. It was a small thing, but I had a laugh. So there you go. Yeah, Chrissy said she wants that night vision scope. Exactly right. So you just stuff on the sides. It just looks so cool, even if it's completely meaningless. So there you go. Why not simply my ride? Well, exactly right. Either my ship, my ride. Keep it simple. Don't have to say it's a fire spray gunship. That's just completely silly. Now, this is an interesting bit of dialogue. Once again, back to the dialogue. So Boba has said, the bloated pig who double-crossed me. And we're trying to work out who's he referring to and what happened. So was it Jabba? And if it was Jabba, how was he crossed? Or was it Bib Fortuna in the in the Return of the Jedi sequences? That's not explained at all. So Fett's been double-crossed, but we don't know how. What do you reckon?
I took that he must be talking about Bib Fortuna because Jabba's dead. And then he wants to go and settle things with Bib Fortuna, who's been one of the few characters he has gone and shot in the face kind of thing. We've discussed that before.
But at this point, he doesn't know that Fortuna's running the palace. Maybe he does know that Fortuna's running the palace, but he clearly hasn't seen him, hasn't visited him, because even Fenix says, why don't you go and ask for your ship back? So it was just an interesting line saying the bloated pig who double-crossed me, and it's not clear as to what that is, and it's never explained. So
well, if we look at the characters in the series and think of bloated pig, is it the mayor? No. Is it one of the Twi'leks who work? No. Is it Bib Fortuna? Bloated pig. So I do think they were talking about him, unless it was someone else we haven't met.
Yeah, because there's clear if it is Bib Fortuna, then clearly there's a bit of backstory that we've missed, where Fett and Fortuna have met each other, and Fortuna in the modern version where he's overweight and he's in charge of the entire palace now. So something's happened there, and we don't know anything about it. So, but clearly Fett's pretty pissed off. He wants to get his revenge, if you will, on the bloated pig. So I thought that was an interesting one because it could be either or. And if people said, "Oh, it's Jabba," I think, well, why would it be Jabba? What did Jabba do? I mean, he was obviously paid to do a job, bring Han Solo back. He brought him back. What's the issue? So it's just one of those sort of lines that didn't make a great deal of sense. But
don't worry, Dags. It'll all come out in the Book of Bib Fortuna.
Indeed, it will. So there you go. Now, this is something we picked up on. Oh, awesome technology. You've got this scanner that runs through the entire the palace. It's fantastic. Shows you everything. I thought, I've seen that somewhere before. And sure enough, we have. We've seen it in the movie Prometheus, where the pups run around and scan everything. It looks great. But, unfortunately, it's been there, done that with technology. What do you reckon?
They kind of had the, the Sith probe droids that floated around in Episode 1 who were looking for things. And that was a cross between the Prometheus scanners and they come back and it's exactly the same. Yeah.
I mean, it was a good sequence. It was all very, very groovy. I mean, of course, the gag of this thing is it's running around the corridors and there are dudes walking up the corridors and it's hiding here and there. And I mean, it had blinking lights on red blinking lights. So that's kind of stand out in the crowd a little bit, don't you reckon?
Yeah. Oh, it manages to just float past people as they're turning their head the other way, though.
Regarding the Book of Bib Fortuna, Chrissy said, don't give Disney your Jesus Christ. All right, so we're getting into whole sorts of exciting stuff. We get into the palace, right? This thing's running around. We're seeing droids left, right, and center. Good old EV-9D9 makes a reappearance, and suddenly it's like, hang on, but it wasn't EV-9D9 stuck in a bar in Mos Eisley, or two of them? And there's a bit of confusion as to which one this happens to be, but you'd have to assume that the one in the palace was the one from Jabba's palace, if that makes sense, during Jedi. So the ones in Mandalorian must be from somewhere else. I don't really know, but it was good to see a bit of EV-999 action again.
And that kind of changed my perception of that droid, because when I was growing up, that was a droid that lived in Jabba's torture chamber and tortured other droids. But of course, it's the head of the droid pool, so it can be anywhere in the palace. And in this one, it was in the kitchens.
Yeah, exactly right. Speaking of being in the kitchens, you got this droid. I know it's a bit hard to look at the image, but at the top up here, you got this particular dude who went the full Grievous for whatever reason. Had the whole spinning arms and all sort of bizzo, but he actually appeared in Attack of the Clones as well, which I thought was kind of interesting. So, how's that? He just goes completely troppo and gets the knives out and they're swinging around. It's like, wait, what's the deal with that?
I thought that was funny, and I thought it was good because it was one of those things where when he does it, it's almost awkward. Like, is it a puppet or is it CG? It's another one of those things where I look at it and I go, I don't know what I'm looking at here. It looks good. It was fantastic, but I don't know if it was CG or a practical effect.
Yeah, I don't either. So Christy said the comic relief for the episode. Oh no, that came up when we had the LEP droid, the rat catcher. Now it was cute, but unbelievably stupid. Don't you reckon? When he's running around the kitchen trying to find this thing, and yeah,
it harks back to two things. They've had these droids before in the Clone Wars, and they kind of were the chicken ones that run away from stuff. But the other thing that I thought was really cool. There's the scene in Return of the Jedi where C-3PO goes to the dungeons, and you do actually see rats are on sitting on the grates on one of the doors. And I'm like, oh, there you go. They really did have a rat infestation problem. And here in Victoria, we're all on rat hunts, aren't we?
Yeah. It's like when you say you're a dirty rat, you're actually a very popular person. So we saw this thing running around, and it was comic and it was stupid at the same time. And I like the fact that at the end, even when Fennec says, "Can we go now?" I think that was like the view of the audience going, "Mate, seriously, this is complete tripe." And of course, there was another reference to the word bugger. So we've got 2 buggers and 2 mates throughout the episode so far. And you are right. I know what you meant, Christy. I was just being a bit facetious. The whole kitchen scene was just completely silly. So in the end, had they just bypassed the kitchen completely and just gone up the stairs or wherever they wanted to go, it would have made life a lot easier. Nothing was achieved by this sequence, but
I do think it was one of those things where Disney are aiming at all ages, and I can imagine kids finding that scene funny, but not you and me.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, the rest of us are going as like using Fennec's line, can we go now? I mean, really, it was just ridiculous. So anyway, not to worry. All right, so this brought up a whole question. So the old Slave One still parked in the parking garage. And of course, everybody's asking the same question. This is 5 years after the fact. Why is it still there? Why wouldn't Bib Fortuna have sold it off for scrap? Plenty of the Jawas would have going, yep, you beauty, we'll have that. And we would have thought he would have sold it years ago. So it didn't make sense.
No, it's one of those things. Maybe there was defenses on it they couldn't get into, but I don't really believe that. I guess the Millennium Falcon sat on Jakku for years and years and years as well. Maybe no one's prepared to put out the credits for it.
Yeah, that doesn't work because that was Unkar Platt's ship, right? He left it there, right? And it was a bit of junk. This was parked in Jabba's palace, his car park. A bit. Fett is killed as far as they're all concerned, and 5 years later, the car is still there. It's like that. Just you would have thought someone says, "Can we just move this out of the way, get it out, and so we can actually get some space back?" So it was cute but silly.
Maybe that bloated pig, Bib Fortuna, takes that into town every time. Maybe they've just used it as their ship now.
Yeah, I mean, it worked well for the story. But you would have thought logically it wouldn't have been there because you think, oh, okay, the previous owners passed away. We've got this thing here. Let's go and sell it off, make a few bucks, and away we go. But anyway, what the hell? So we finally have an action scene, and amongst that action scene, Fennec finally gets to do some stuff, shooting shit, killing dudes, beating up dudes, all the rest of it. And it was all very, very groovy. And, of course, they've got to turn the ship around to try and get it to fly out and all the sort of bizzo. And all these soldiers appear from absolutely everywhere. I do wonder if the Gamorrean guards we saw in this getting beaten up are the ones who eventually joined Fett's crew later on, because they would have been in the area somewhere. But how'd you make of all this?
I was more impressed by the Gamorrean guards in this. They kind of looked like halfway between Return of the Jedi and the ones we've got at the moment, which was a bit more easy on the nostalgic eye for me. And also, they got out one of the insults that Anakin says in in Phantom Menace. They call her a slimo, which was from that, which I thought was nice, as she shoots a Weequay through the head.
Yep, as one does. So like Fett's maybe had a self-defense system. The problem with that, you think 5 years they would have got through it one way or another. I mean,
send in another Gamorrean, boom. Send in another Gamorrean, boom.
So yes, you would have thought that they would have had that figured out. But whatever. The ship was there. He picked it up. The fire spray gunship there you go. Now, this is, once again, it's back to the dialogue, right? And some people put 2 and 2 together with this very, very quickly, right? Fett says there's an advantage when everyone thinks you're dead. But the problem is he keeps introducing himself to everybody and taking his friggin' helmet off. So that's completely contradictory to what he just said.
Well, maybe this is just before he reveals to everyone that he's back, because this is still flashback stuff.
But he went to the droid. He picked the droid up, right? The rat catcher, and said, "I am Boba Fett." It's like, to a freaking robot. And, of course, the robot powers down. The moment it powers back up again, he said, "Oh, guess who I ran into? Boba Fett." You fucking hell. Unbelievable. So but it seems to happen a lot because he says, because the way he says it, Tamara Morrison says, I am Boba Fett. He just says it to everybody. So, dude, like, everybody's going to know you're alive because you're walking around with your freaking helmet off all the time. Anyway, I know it's all very pedantic, but it is. Stupid dialogue is stupid dialogue, regardless of whether it's intentional or not intentional. And if you look at it and go, you know what, that is just cockeyed, whatever. But, it is what it is.
If you and I are trying to justify the dialogue and giving it a reason, it's probably not great dialogue.
Yeah, it could be too. However, having said all that, there was some really, really good shit, right? Now, the first thing I picked up is the fact that the Kingston Striders are a much bigger group, right? This is when the Slave One is chasing them. And there's a lot of them now. So this is obviously a number of years after the slaughter of the Tuscans. So they're a bigger group. And I've got to admit, even though it was kind of cowardly, he comes from behind and shoots the shit out of all of them. It did look pretty spectacular. What do you reckon? It was really, really well done.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if this was done deliberately, as in it used the shots from another popular 80s movie, but it actually really reminded me of Neverending Story, where Bastian comes down on Falcor and goes after the kids that have bullied him, like almost shot for shot.
Yeah. But you can see that the Kingston Striders, the Nikto guys, are a much, much bigger group now. So, and they are miners after all. So maybe there's a whole bunch of them just herbing around. But as we said earlier, wouldn't it have been ironic if they were not responsible for the Tuscan destruction, the tribe destruction?
I'll tell you what's great. Sound design in this is amazing, and nostalgia in sound is great. Where you hear Slave One, you hear the guns, you hear the speeder bikes and stuff. It was a well filmed scene, and the sound design is fantastic.
Yeah, and of course, as the audience, we're all sitting there going, "Oh, mate, this is going to be awesome!" When he just shoots the bejesus out of these dudes, and they just all get knocked off. And it was very, very cool. That then led into this. We're back to the Sarlacc, right? And the thing I liked is that you finally get to see what's left of poor old the katana, good old Jabba's sail barge, big gap in the middle there, and all the rest of it. And as was discussed through the dialogue, even Fett thought that Jabba's thing of like chucking Han and Luke into the Sarlacc was really OTT, over the top, totally unnecessary, right? And I thought, well, look where it all sort of ended up. And the thing I found interesting about this sequence is, I tell you what, the Slave One, that can hover. That has got awesome hovering ability. The fact you got to park it right over the mouth. That is a very, very cool sequence. A little bit probably unnecessary.
I think I said to you, it's again one of those things where the Star Wars universe, the physics don't apply, because when it's trying to pull itself out, it looks like the rockets are firing up that would force it down in further. Yeah.
Hit the old reverse and see how we go. Now, I think it was in the first episode of the entire series, we talked about the Sarlacc and how they looked exactly like the 1983 version. Oh my God, classic! Until, of course, the lips made a reappearance, the old special edition Sarlacc lips, the Specky Eddie. So as it turned out, the lips were there after all. So Specky Eddie it is. What do you reckon?
It was just one of those really cold days on Tatooine where the lips have just sank back inside the Sarlacc. I was surprised that the Slave One could fit inside the Sarlacc.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good sequence, right? I mean, they've got the torch down its mouth, and then this thing just wakes up, and it's like, oh my guacamole, this is just unbelievable. The thing's alive. I mean, some people have argued, how could the tentacles hold the ship down where it couldn't even pull down Lando Calrissian? Let's not worry about physics. But it was a good moment. And even though when you sit and think about it, he's got the ship parked right over its mouth. Maybe it's cracked the shits because, like, hey, I'm trying to get a suntan here, dude. What are you doing?
It was one of my favorite scenes from probably the whole series so far, because the Sarlacc was one of those things you see in the desert for one sequence in Jedi, and then your imagination, because of what they've said about it, and now they've really expanded on it, and it was a fantastic scene. I thought it was very atmospheric.
Even Grant has said his son said that it was the scariest thing he'd seen in Star Wars. And it is scary because you don't really know much about it, right? It's just, dare I say, it looks like a giant bloody rectum in Tatooine. It really is the arse end of Tatooine, literally. But it was good. And it was actually a really, really cool sequence because you didn't expect it to come alive, holding the ship down. I mean, sure, we knew they were going to get out of it. But at the time, it was very well done. And, of course, once they dropped the seismic charge into it and you go, and he starts to swallow it and you go, oh, my God, this is never going to end well. And you cannot knock a seismic charge in the Star Wars universe. With the same sound effect and everything with the electric guitar, that was very, very groovy. Oh, completely unnecessary, completely stupid, but geez, I tell you what, it looked good. What do you reckon?
You can criticize Attack of the Clones for a lot of things, but that is a very cool weapon, and the sound design of that, again, in the cinema was fantastic, and they've gone back to that and destroyed the Sarlacc in a very classy way.
Now, Gavin's watching this, and he teaches guitar. And if I was to see Gavin, I'd say, dude, I just want to know how to play one note. I don't care about anything else. Just show me how to do the seismic charge, because that is very, very groovy.
I think that one note is the one note you hear at a disaster area concert from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Absolutely love it. All right, so this is where it got a bit stupid, right? So good old Fett goes back into the Sarlacc without any protection whatsoever, even though it's all the digestive juices down there. He's looking for his armor that we as the audience clearly know is not there because the Jawas took it, right? And you can look at this and go, well, isn't that a totally unnecessary sequence? Because we know as the audience what's happened, but you can understand it from his point of view, because he obviously was in the suit when he got out of the Sarlacc, really disillusioned, probably in a dream sequence, thinking, oh, I didn't know that the Jawas took it. As to why you would think the suit was still in the Sarlacc when he got out is anybody's guess. It logically makes no sense, but it made for a good action sequence with the Sarlacc, and now we know for a fact that the Sarlacc is dead. But I thought it was just stupid. He goes back in there, doesn't even put any protection on whatsoever, and then comes out and goes, no, it's not there. It's like, what's the deal with that?
Pours water over himself to get the acid off. That's one hard person who does that. It did confirm two things for me. Boba Fett's armor is Beskar. They finally confirmed it. Yep. And also in the flashback, you saw in his flashback in the dream sequence that he was in armor and out of armor. If he was delirious and didn't remember, maybe that is his memory of it, where he doesn't know one way or the other. So when he has a dream sequence, there's parts where he's in armor and parts where he's not in his armor.
Yeah, you're right. You can certainly look at it from that way. The only downside is we as the audience know what happened to it. So to a large degree, I mean, it was a good... If anything, you could just go, I'm coming back to kill the Sarlacc because I've just got a bit of an aggro streak. I've killed the Kingston Striders. I just want to kill the Sarlacc and be done with it, not go inside and say, oh, where's my armor? And then because we already know what's happened to it. Russell's made a mention about that the Sarlacc would have gotten pooped at anyway. It was in the expanded universe, I think that sort of happened. The Sarlacc spat it out. And of course, the Jawas took it. But still, by the same token, it was a little bit silly. Was Fett meaning don't touch my buttons metaphorically or just in the ship? Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, theoretically, it should be don't push my buttons. And, of course, Fennec saves the day, and then he cracks the shits at her and says, don't touch my buttons. And go, yeah, I kind of didn't get that. But
I actually thought he was being facetious. I thought that was a deadpan joke.
Yeah. Grant said he crawled out with it, so he should know it wasn't down there. Yeah, we're working on the view that he was delirious. And as you said, Aaron, maybe he didn't know if it was on or not on because he passes out almost straight away. I get that. But it was from, as I said earlier, as the audience, we know what's happened to it. So it's actually a bit of a waste of time. It's like, dude, you don't have to go down there. We already know it's gone the Mickey whoop with the Jawa. So
yeah.
Anyway, not to worry. Where were we? All right. So this is interesting, right? So we got the ship back. Big campfire scene, and this is the whole business where Fett explains what he's trying to do, right? And he said, effectively, don't work for idiots. But as some people have pointed out, he himself is an idiot because he really doesn't know anything about what he's doing. He's a bounty hunter. He doesn't know any other profession. And even though this was a really good sequence and they sort of team up together and all the rest of it, the bottom line is Fett is a bit of a knob. He's got no idea what he's doing. And he even acknowledges that Fennec is actually smarter than he is. So if you're getting paid to do these jobs, and if you didn't like them, then you don't do them, right? So the methodology here as to explaining why he's going down this path of being a crime lord kind of doesn't make sense, even though it's been cut down to a very simplistic explanation. So even like kids can understand it. Oh, this is why he's going to become a crime lord, even though logically it makes very little sense because don't work for idiots. You know, who's more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows it? So how'd you take that?
Well, I kind of thought it goes back to I'm just a simple man trying to find my way in the universe. Bounty hunter is a simple job. You get a chit, tells you what you've got to do, you go and do it. And what he has seen over, a lifetime of bounty hunting, he does his job really well. And the politics behind it, crime lords come and go. And I kind of figure he's gone, you know what? I've worked for a bunch of idiots. I can do this better. Now he's going to try it, and it's a steep learning curve where he's like, oh, hang on, it's a lot more than just doing stuff. It's machinations and making people work together and trying to make everything happen how you want. So he may look like an idiot because he thought it was going to be simpler than it actually is.
Yeah, I think you're probably on the right track there. So, but it was interesting because it's not like he's coming to it saying, well, this is how I would have done it, right? Because he's got no freaking idea what he's doing. And it was just, we saw from the first episode, the first day on the job, he's a complete tool. He's got no idea what's going on with regards to the tributes and all the rest of it. So you are right. Completely underestimated how hard it was. In fact, if anything, it'd be funny if there was dialogue later on where he says, yeah, this is tougher than I thought it was going to be. Bounty hunting is way more easier. You get the job, you go out, you get the dude, you come back, get your money. Everybody's happy. And everybody's always worked for bosses. Maybe it's a euphemism for Lucasfilm working for Disney or whatever, working for bosses who are complete freaking idiots. So I don't know. Let's move on, Joe.
Almost like the subplot from Grosse Point Blank, where Dan Aykroyd wants to unionize assassins and finds it really hard to do because none of the assassins want to join his union.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, so we've discovered now that Fett is now completely healed. He's done his back to sessions, which obviously would have been occurring during the Mandalorian series because this has actually occurred afterwards. And he's now one healthy puppy, which is kind of good to see. This I thought was a nice little gag for those who didn't put two and two together. The Fenix is the Mayor's major domo is singing like a Yuzum, and that, of course, is a nice link directly back to the Return of the Jedi Special Edition, because that is a Yuzum right there, the Specky Eddie, doing the old Jedi rocks. I thought that was a nice little gag for those who didn't put two and two together, which is kind of groovy. And then, of course, we end up in the Sanctuary Cantina with good old Chrysanthemum and the Trandoshans. And clearly they don't mix. And it was interesting because it's worth bringing up that in the first episode, a Trandoshan actually brings in a Wookiee pelt. So there's clearly a history between these two species. And Trandoshans, especially in the Clone Wars, are treated as a real bunch of bastards. They were like, real slave traders and all the rest of it. So clearly their history with Wookiees hasn't been very, very good. So I thought it was a very interesting sort of scenario here, seeing how Chrysanthemum was going to deal with these guys, considering he's obviously getting a bit drunk and these guys are winning all this money. And something was about to snap, and it did. What do you reckon?
Well, the thing is, you are right. In the backstories and in the comics, they hate each other's guts. And they do, they are slave traders and trade in Wookiees. And that's one of the reasons why they hate each other's guts. In the backstory, Bosca's had his legs pulled off. And I don't know if you know, they're kind of like real lizards. They grow back again. So he will grow his arm back. From what we saw. And I was bringing something up with you before. This is the first time on screen we've seen the Wookiee actually pull some guy's poor arms out of his socket, but there was a deleted scene from Attack of the Force Awakens, where that happened and Chewbacca did that, and then was it? What's the character's name?
It was Unkar Plutt. Yeah, exactly right. So
Chewbacca beats him over the head with his own arms, which you can find online if you do search for it. It's not actually on the deleted scenes of the DVDs, but I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly right. Chrissy said it's easy to critique from the sidelines. As fans, that is what we are meant to do, and quality is quality. And if there's, we'll always highlight really good stuff, really great stuff, things that really work. Yay, team. Absolutely. Give it the whole beans, right? But if something is cocked up and if something is silly or stupid, we're going to pull that out as well. So we're not going to just do the gush and go, it is the greatest thing we have ever seen in our lives. And go, hang on, that part doesn't make sense. And we're going to say why it doesn't make sense. Otherwise, our reviews would be a tad boring if we just said everything is awesome. Yes, because that's not necessarily the case at all. Having said that, we're happy to be proven wrong if this situation presents itself. I like this from Madzi. Obviously, Bacta doesn't help with weight loss. Yeah, good on you. There you go. Thought they would have put up a better fight. Oh, you got to remember, these would not have been like warrior dudes. These are just like, what do you call, bureaucrats, if you will. The Trandoshan guys, they're just normal dudes out and about. It was clear to the way they dressed. They weren't violent guys at all. So remember, you can't lump them all in the same bucket. But yes.
I probably would have liked more of a trigger for him to go up and do it, because they weren't really provoking him. Maybe if it had been something really trivial, like they knocked a drink over him or something like that, him just sitting there watching them play gambling and then just getting up and ripping their arms off was a bit over the top. I guess everyone loves the character though. So
yeah, it's just jealousy and envy. And you're right, Adzi, it did happen in Solo. Chewbacca ripped off the arms of the guy in the elevator. So yes, well done, good spotting. So there you go. Okay, Christy. Yep, sorry. Okay, I'll retract what I said. Yeah, it's easy for Fett to critique from the sidelines. Yep, all good. And I agree with you, Grant. It wouldn't be Star Wars without a limb being removed. There was actually a website once called the Chopped Off Arms of Star Wars. Now, I thought this was interesting. So Gaza comes back and she makes a reference to Chrysanthemum about the gladiatorial combat in the Star Wars universe. And I was trying to work out when that would have been. Would have been during the Galactic Empire era or sometime earlier during the Old Republic. No big deal. Just one of those things I thought I brought up. But obviously, Chrysanthemum has had a bit of a hard life. And his time with Trandashans hasn't been very, very good. And it was just one of those things where he just went the full Wookiee on them. And as it turned out, it was definitely going to leave a mark, as we mentioned here. So, yes, exactly right. There you go.
There's, I don't know if you picked it up as well. They did confirm that is Max Rebo because she goes, play on Max kind of thing. So,
yeah. And the thing I picked up on is that in Chalmans Cantina, when the Ponda Barber's arm gets cut off, right, the music starts up and everybody just returns back. But here in the Sanctuary Cantina, clearly the patrons are a little bit more upper class and they're not used to violence inside there because they're going, the big shock scene, right? So it's no big deal. It's just an observation. But I thought, it just goes to show the clientele is completely different between the two respective places.
In that picture you've got there, I don't know if you noticed the Twi'lek or Twi'lek in the background seems to be wearing Leia's metal bikini.
Oh, yeah, could be. Yeah, very good. Trust you to notice things like that. So, Anyway, as I said, it was just an observation. Nothing particular.
I've got an eye for these details.
Very well. You always want to keep abreast of the situation. Exactly right. Good stuff. Now we predicted this, of course, that Chrysanthemum, after getting kicked out of Fett's thing last week, is now suddenly joining Fett. I don't know why I just didn't join him in the first place. Save us all this dicking around. So, and somebody did point out that as the daimyo of the group, Fett's watching Chrysanthemum busting up these Trandoshan guys, and he just lets it happen. I thought he's supposed to step in and go, no, I'm in charge now. Don't do it. But they just let it go through the sequence as it did. But Chrysanthemum joining Fett, that was a no-brainer, and we predicted that one. So quite pleased about that. So what do you reckon?
Yeah. Also, I think if you wanted to be aligned with one of the groups or the other, you'd probably want the giant Wookiee on your side, wouldn't you?
Indeed. And after all that, it's taken us 4 episodes, right? But we finally get to the crux of the story, right? Which we saw in the trailer. Fett gets all the dudes together to team up against the Pike Syndicate. Now, even though you could argue that the Pike Syndicate really isn't that big a deal for the Tatooine, it's like, can't we all just live together as friends? At least we got to see all the dudes around the table, and because they all look after their respective areas of Mos Espa and all this sort of business, and it was all particularly groovy. Although, having said that, having the table on top of the Rancor pit was actually a kind of cool thing, and the Rancors underneath. That was a good moment. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it was pretty cool, and you got to see the representatives of all the different factions. You kind of get a bit of information and backstory of what's happening. As far as I remember, the mayor is being paid off by the Pikes, and the Pikes are taking over territories on Tatooine. The members of the different guilds are getting paid off by cuts of spice, but Boba Fett doesn't like that happening, so he's got to put a stop to it.
I like this one from Gavin. If you want to see Chewie ripping arms off, play Star Wars Lego games. Good for the kids. Yeah, exactly right. Children love having arms ripped out of characters. That's definitely the way to go. Would you step in a fight with a Wookiee? Well, yeah, exactly right. And it was a good sequence with Transish, Chrysanthemum and all the rest of it. And afterwards, he's joined the group. Chrysanthemum is actually the coolest character in the entire series, in my opinion. Right? Yes. He's really. We had this thing about breakout characters. We said, Fennec Shan is just waiting for her time to break out and be the character. But Chrysanthemum is the dude, right? He's like Chewbacca, but amped up a few extra notches. And if anything, I want to see more of him doing his shit because he looks great, he sounds great, and he's just a cool dude. And he's really going places.
Boba Fett used to be the coolest character because he didn't say anything. Now it's Chrysanthemum that doesn't say anything. So now he's the coolest character.
Yep, totally agree. So you do wonder about that sometimes, eh? It's why the brass knuckle. It's a good point, and it's hard to say. I mean, maybe he has lost his claws because he was obviously in gladiatorial combat, so maybe they were removed or they were broken or whatever else. It's a good point, but it does look good though. And I tell you what, those brass knuckles, they would definitely leave a mark. So continuing on. So as we said, putting the table over the Rancor pit, which you didn't even notice at the time, even though the establishing shot showed the dais and the chair and all the rest of it, you just didn't put two and two together until the Rancor came up. The mod squad are missing from this scene, and that was probably a good thing because I think their inclusion would have made it look dumb. But they're apparently looking for Mock Shies. I mean, all you do is Mos Eisley. That's where he's hanging out. So, but I did notice that their absence, and be curious to see if they make a reappearance at any point. But as you said, okay, all the groups are together. We're all against the Pikes, yada, yada, yada. Clearly, that's not going to work. Something's going to go completely pear-shaped. What do you reckon?
Well, I thought it was really interesting because they are all aliens we've seen from Star Wars before. They all are aliens that have been represented as bad guys in Star Wars. You know, it's one of those things where you have all races, and it's like humans. There's good ones and bad ones, but these are all ones that we've seen as bad guys. And would you trust this bunch at the table? I thought it was very reminiscent of the Godfather scene where he has all of them there and is talking about what they're going to do and they're getting their cuts from drugs and stuff like that. And we all know how that goes down in the future.
So in the end, when we get to this scene up here with Fennec and Fett, all it came down to is like Shan should have said, how did you know they were going to go along with your plans? And Fennec says, I made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Anyway, we get to this point here. The Din Djarin music from Mandalorian cues in, right? It's like, oh my God, okay, because she says, you know, if you got the money, you buy the muscle. So it's clear to see that Din is going to make a reappearance. Otherwise, the music cue is unnecessary. And I think if that happens, two things will occur. If Din does come back, then as always, he has the potential of being the more popular of the two characters. And if he does come back, will he take his helmet off, just like Fett does, because we now know what he looks like? And then secondly, about who else is going to appear, whether it be Boss, Dengar, maybe even Cobb Vanth, all those sort of dudes, people we've seen previously. What are your thoughts on all that?
I would think they don't need to take the helmet off because then it's like cheaper. They can just get anyone in the suit. I don't know if they'd actually do that, but I don't think he'd take the helmet off because it's obviously Boba Fett's show, so he's going to be the one calling the shots. Like you said, will they bring back anyone? If anything, I think that Boss might, because they've been foreshadowing it with so many Trandoshans or Trandoshans in different episodes. Maybe he will be working for the Pikes. Like all bets are off with what they do in this show. Like I don't know who will come back. I think that the next two episodes are definitely going to be the ones where, you know, things are going to really start to happen and there's going to be some wow moments.
Yeah, totally agree with you. So it was just funny they should put the Mandalorian cue music in. You go, okay, but if Din comes back, you don't want him to overshadow Fett. So you think straight off for the helmet, everybody gets to see what Pablo looks like. All right, done. We're all on even keels here now, so it's all very, very groovy. Watch this space. I know there's a lot of fan cry out saying, "I'll bring Boss back in." I don't know about Dengar so much, but if Boss does come back in, then be curious to see how he reacts to Chrysanthemum, because clearly there's obviously a bit of antagonistic sentiments between those two species, but we'll have to wait and see. But at the very least, Din should be making a reappearance very, very soon. So watch this space. As someone once said, when Mandalorian was on, fans were hanging out to see Boba Fett. And now we're in Boba Fett's show, and they're waiting to see Din make an appearance. So there you go. Go figure how times have changed.
And it'll get to the end of the show, and people will go, oh, it's a shame that Grogu wasn't in it.
Yeah, he walks in carrying this package. Oh, yeah, Luke didn't want him. He's dropped him back off to me. In the last shot of the episode, we finally work out where the bedroom is. So we've got this beautiful pullback from Fett's bedroom, which is, you know, even the windows match up down here to up there, which is all kind of groovy with all the curtains. And there it is up there in the top of the tower. So I thought at least we finally worked out where that part is, which I thought was kind of groovy. So yay, team. What do you reckon?
Yeah. So I think it wrapped up really nicely because this time I think everyone is looking forward to what will happen next week. And the stories have kindly met up. I think we've done with the flashbacks now.
Yeah, that should be the end of it. And I think it should just move on now with the present, and we'll see how it goes. And I think, we'll just sort of see what comes of it, which is kind of groovy. If Mando was any indicator, expect a few surprises. Well, you would think so, eh? But by the same token, they don't want him to be too good. Otherwise, Boba Fett, our major character, will be just sort of shafted off to the sideline. People say, no, I want to see more Din. So we'll have to see what happens. Good stuff. Now, we're at the end. That's actually the last of our slides. Now, this is just for people out there who are interested to try and work out what's going on in terms of the timeline, because we've got the past, we've got the present, and all the rest of it. Some of this is speculation, but I just wanted to cover this off pretty quickly as we get to the end of the show, just so people know how it all kind of works. Now, we're using the in-universe system ABY, which is after the Battle of Yavin, right? So for those who don't know. So there's a 5-year period. Okay, so the present or the past is 4 ABY, which is after the Battle of Yavin, which is when Return of the Jedi is set. And then 5 years later, which is 9 after the Battle of Yavin. Okay, so that's the present material. So if you're looking at the past, so in the flashback sequences, like if Fett escapes the Sarlacc, now we're assuming he was in there for either a couple of weeks or a month after Return of the Jedi. As we said, we don't know. There's a bit of speculation there. Jawas take Fett's armor. We know that. Fett joins the Tusken tribe, and Cobb Vanth, which was in the Mandalorian, obtains Fett's armor from the after the fall of the Empire. Okay, so that's how all that sort of fits in. That is roughly around the time frame of Return of the Jedi. In the present sequences, so Fett has found Fennec Shand in the desert. We know this because it matches up with the Mandalorian series. He gets his ship back, and that's where he kills the Kingston Striders. Okay, in the events of the Mandalorian, Fett then obviously nicks off Tatooine, gets his armor back from Din Djarin, and then returns to Tatooine and kills Bib Fortuna. Okay, so that's where that all takes place. And then, of course, the Book of Boba Fett continues on in the present. The tricky bit is working on what happens in between. So the speculation is that the Tusken tribe is killed by the Kingston Striders maybe 5 or 6 months into after Fett arrives. So this is working on the view that he didn't spend that much time there where he really integrated himself into their society. He was relatively close. This is the whole thing with the train, where they attack the train and all the rest of it. And then Fett nicks off to talk to the Pikes at Mos Eisley, gets back, and the Tusken tribe is killed. So we're working on the view it's a 6-month period. That, of course, is not confirmed. It's just a theory. And then, of course, that means that the next 4.5 years, Fett is alone on Tatooine, herbing around on his bantha. That's the reason why he's got such a strong connection to the bantha. Okay, and of course, in that time, he's trying to get his ship back. As I said, that's once again speculation. The only thing that makes no sense whatsoever is that why didn't Fett go to the Sarlacc during this period to look for his armor? Why wait all those years to get his ship and then go back to the Sarlacc? That's the bit that makes no sense, especially considering he goes into the Sarlacc wearing the clothes that he's wearing. So that's the only thing that makes no sense. So does this, in your opinion, would that sort of all match up?
No, in my head, he maybe spent a couple of years with the Tusken tribe because I don't think he would have taken that long to try and get revenge on the gang. So I was thinking that it was a couple of years, but then it's really hard to work out because when he goes back to the Sarlacc pit, if it was a couple of years, you'd think that the katana would be totally gone and scavenged and all the metal would have been gone by the Jawas, and it doesn't look like it's taken that long. So it is a really hard one to do a timeline on until, Lucasfilm or Disney come out and go, this is it,
Yeah, and the only other thing that needs to be sort of clarified is obviously he got the ship back, he's left Tatooine, right? He gets his armor. Why come back to Tatooine? Why don't you got everything you've ever wanted? You got your ship, you got your armor, you got Fennec. Why this sudden urge to return to Tatooine, kill Bib Fortuna, become the crime lord of Tatooine? Because Tatooine still is, it's the bright center of the universe. It's the planets that's farthest from us. So it's unusual why he should pick that particular place. I mean, why he wasn't born there, as an example. Why the drive to return to Tatooine?
I was kind of thinking that the Pikes had set up Tatooine as a major spice smuggling hub, and that's why the Hutts were withdrawing, because there was like a major power shift on Tatooine. But it is one of those things wherever you revisit something that has already existed before, you can only sort of limit it by, saying this has happened here and this has happened here. And you kind of think, well, there's the whole universe where other stuff happens, but why does everything happen on this planet? Why do all the aliens always invade England in Doctor Who? It's kind of that kind of thing.
No, it's a good point. Everybody's sort of used to the Tatooine environment, and then I guess the familiarity part is key to the thing. Regarding the palace, but for a fortified palace, the bedroom is majorly exposed. You're exactly right. I mean, that was probably sort of intentional because they're not afraid. Like Jabba's, when he was there originally, was thinking, here I am. If you want me, come and get me. And of course, nobody ever did. And as he kind of agrees with you. So there you go. But until we get confirmation, we don't really know. So I've said 6 months, give or take. You said a couple of years. Nobody really knows for sure. We thought we'd put that in anyway because there's been a lot of confusion. It's been a lot for people's heads to sort of like get around it. And hopefully that's kind of helped a little bit. So There you go, kiddies. Very, very cool. And the cool thing is, of course, in 2 days' time, episode 5, we're past halfway now. We've only got 3 episodes left to go. Oh, my God, the Book of Boba Fett. How groovy is that? Here we go. Do you think there's a faction working in the shadows? We worked on this assumption that Crimson Dawn had something to do with it. So far, there's been no indication of that whatsoever. I can't imagine there's anybody else at this point. I don't know what you think.
I'm probably assuming it's Crimson Dawn and that it might be Kira or someone will be revealed as... There's got to be something, unless they really, really shake things up and it's Palpatine and they try and like tie it back into the Disney sequels. But I don't think so. That's not likely, but you never know.
Yeah, exactly right. And as Christy said, yeah, there always is. So we'll have to wait. Maybe it'll happen on the very last episode of the series. Like, oh my God, there's this huge reveal. There's a dude in the shadows, some shifty character. Have to wait for season 2. So
I have a question for you, Dags. This is the Book of Boba Fett. Do you think it's a one-shot series, or do you think there'll be the volume 2?
Based on my view, I would think if it's a one-shot series, that would be enough. I think with all the other series that Lucasfilm is producing, you don't need to continue on. Mandalorian is in a similar boat. I mean, obviously, if Din turns up, will he have the Darksaber? Because he got that at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's legs beyond this, unless Din and Fett team up together and they end up having their own adventures. But I don't know. Not entirely sure.
Well, the other thing, we left Din as the leader of Mandalore when they go, there's muscle if you know where to look for it. If he turns up, does that mean he has the entire forces of Mandalore with him? So if there is a bigger crime boss and they're like, how do we deal with this? Bo-Katan and everyone turns up and it's a much bigger ending than anyone's expecting.
Yeah, it's a good point. The interesting thing, of course, is the Pike Syndicate is a big syndicate. It's a big crime gang. And, of course, the Star Wars universe has shown that you don't muck around with the Pike Syndicate, right? They're almost the top tier of scary dudes, right? You had the Hutt crime syndicate, you got the Pikes, you got Crimson Dawn. So if the Mandalorian guys were to get their hands involved with the Pikes, that could have long-term repercussions further down the track. So... yeah, hopefully they take that into consideration rather than just saying, oh, there's these random dudes on Tatooine. Because we saw what happened when the train was destroyed. The tribe got knocked out from the Tuskens by the Pikes. So, yeah, it could then have far-reaching consequences. But, yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah. So we'll have to wait and see. Very good stuff. All right, with that in mind, we're going to sign off for this evening. So the next episode is out in a couple of days' time, and we'll be back next Monday to chat about it and take it apart and do all sorts of good, exciting, nerdy things. What do you reckon there, Mr. Aaron?
I think I'm looking forward to next episode more than I was looking forward to this. Are you going to ask me my rating out of 10?
Give us your rating out of 10, old son.
This is an 8. I like this one.
Ooh, an 8. I don't know. So I'm torn. Some of the silly stuff was a little bit too silly. It was good that it was a longer episode. There was more in it. I'm going to go 7.5. That's just pushing.
Oh,
that's just
yeah. I was happy the Mod Squad didn't turn up again.
Yeah, that's true. And the ones that we did see it looked a little bit more threatening and a little bit more what do you call it?
Now we know what happens when you blow up a power droid.
Yeah, well, that's right. They go thermonuclear. Oh, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it's going to leave a mark, that's for sure. So very, very cool. All right, we're going to buzz off. We'll leave you till we'll see you next Monday. And in the interim, we'll see you. Catch you later.
Have a good night, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.